Major production funding for Vote Utah 2016 comes from Domo, connecting people with data to change the way business is managed. Domo's customers include 20% of the Fortune 50, leveraging Domo to find insights in their data and take action to improve results. Domo, powered by the Business Cloud. Learn more at domo.com. Additional production funding comes from Utah Community Credit Union, celebrating 60 years of inspiring smart decisions. Founded on BYU campus, UCCU is a not-for-profit financial institution dedicated to the simple ideal of people helping people. UCCU.com has information on how UCCU can help families and the community. And from Nu Skin, demonstrating a more than 30-year commitment to the community and offering beauty and wellness products. Discover the best you at nuskin.com.
Election results are coming into focus tonight. All evening, you've been hearing why Utah voters made the choices they made. And you've been getting reaction to those choices from Utah candidates. There's more to come. This is Vote Utah 2016 election night coverage. Welcome back with Dr. David Magleby, Distinguished Professor of Political Science at BYU. I'm Bruce Lindsay. The highly anticipated release of the Utah College's exit poll projections gives us something different from the polls you've been reading about for more than a year. This survey is based on actual votes cast, not what people say they think or what they might do, but who they really voted for. It's been an hour since the first release of that poll, and since then students have continued to input the data, and it probably is a good time to update that if there have been any changes.
Well, and as we heard from Mr. Caroon, there's still lines at some voting places. So
at 9 o'clock.
We expect, yes, it's been some years we've had voters there until 10. So we're still interviewing and still entering data. Joining me now is Josh Cooper, a student of political science. We're going to go to Chaffetz, my bad. Okay, so I'm going to review quickly the projected vote as of now in Owens Love. It's 47% for Love, 42% for Owens. For us, that's within the margin of error. 5% voted for someone else and 3% skipped. So we're continuing to watch this closely, in part because we're wondering what's going on with all of that additional vote that's coming in. And to help us understand the election a little more, I think we actually have Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz to be interviewed and give us his perspective.
Yes, I'm here with Jason Chaffetz, going up for another term this year. Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Oh, it's an honor and privilege to be here. It's always good to be with my wife, Julie, and our daughter, Kate, as well.
Great. You're also the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. You've actually been a big player in the case against Hillary Clinton and her emails. What comes next for that, depending on whether or not she gets elected tonight?
I think it's important to understand that in this nation, we are self-critical. We do things differently than most nations. So win or lose, we're going to look at this. And Hillary Clinton, just the fact is, she created a massive mess that has put people's lives in danger. And we deal with classified information in this nation very seriously. We got to clean up that mess. And I intend to do that whether or not she becomes the next president or not.
Okay. And where does the case kind of go from here?
Well, look, documents still need to come in from the State Department. The FBI has a lot of questions they need to ask. And literally, I go back on the first part of the week, and we will get after that starting next week.
Great. And you actually publicly unendorsed Trump a while ago, but then you did announce that you voted for him. Were you voting more party over principle?
No, I think the principle is that we should never, as a nation, stand for or believe in or accept somebody who talks and acts the way Donald Trump did. And that's why I just said, hey, I can't endorse them and look two of the most important people in my life in the eye. But in the context of an election and Hillary Clinton, I think she is far worse. I mean, she has this propensity and this frequency of looking in the camera and just lying. And so in the context of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, I just thought, my goodness, there's no way I could possibly ever vote for Hillary Clinton. And so announced and told people, and as I did last week, I voted for Donald Trump.
Okay, and we can toss it back to the studio with Dr. Magleby and Bruce Lindsay. I can relay any questions that they have.
Well, Congressman, many people in Utah saw these two candidates in the ways you just described them. They didn't like either of them. It appears many held their noses. With respect to how close the race seems to be nationally. It could have been, though, that Utah, if it had voted for McMullen, would have helped to force this to the House of Representatives, where it could have been a very different story. Did that calculus ever enter your mind?
No, I think the reality is there's only two people who have a chance to become the next president of the United States, and that's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And it's the definition of a true dilemma. You've got to make a choice at that point. Look, if my endorsement had mattered, Mitt Romney would be the president of the United States. And originally when I started, I endorsed Marco Rubio. But Donald Trump was the Republican nominee. And at the end of the day, you got two choices, in my opinion. And other good people disagree. You can vote for other people on the ballot. You can write somebody in. But in my opinion, you have to make that tough choice, and that tough choice is between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And in that context, it's no contest. There's no way Hillary Clinton should be the next president of the United States.
One of the curiosities we've got tonight is why the Republicans are all over town. And it's posed an interesting challenge for our student reporters. Is there some problem within the Republican Party such that you can't all party at the same place?
Yeah, I think we are a bit fractured. I mean, originally they had set up this. We're at Rice-Eccles Stadium here at the University of Utah, and originally it was said that members of the House and Senate, we needed to pony up $10,000. And as I told the Salt Lake Tribune, I'm not paying to go to my own party. When I go to Chuck E. Cheese, at least they give me free tokens. So they changed that, but yeah, right. Mia Love and Mike Lee set up their own party, but I'm glad to be here at the. I'm going to bounce around to all of them. So
you're going to several parties tonight. We'll enjoy. Congratulations,
for a Tuesday night. Yeah, there are a lot of parties. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Let's hear some more of the motivation behind the voting tonight in the statewide and the congressional races. You have another one of your bright number crunchers here, Dr. Magleby.
Well, this is Josh Cooper, who's been helping us immensely with this phone bank operation that we've been doing so that we could reach early voters. And I'm glad we've done it, Josh. It's had an extraordinary success. We're up to a number of respondents about what as of now?
So in the phones, we are above something above 5,000 responded. So that's great. Somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that helps us be more confident that we have the whole picture of Utah voters. Now let's bore down on some of the most interesting and important races. I think we're probably going to start with the 4th Congressional District. Is that correct?
Yes, we're going to start with the 4th Congressional District and kind of look at how Utah voters, the more details of how they voted today. And the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the vote by party ID in the 4th Congressional District. And what that will give us is it will show us kind of why this race is close, because in that race currently, Doug Owens leads among independents. So if you look, he currently has 54% of the independent vote, just a little bit above Mia Love, which kind of shows us why that race is so close. Also, he has 94% of Democrats, which is a stronger margin than Mia Love's 88 among Republicans. So you can see why the race is close there.
In the past, when candidates have done well in this race, this has been sort of the key measure right there. How many Republicans defect to vote for Jim Matheson or other Democrats that have done well, like Bill Orton and so forth, over the last 30 years? That 12% is still not high enough to get Owens where he needs to be, I don't think. And we'll watch as additional surveys come in. But it's close because of that, but it may be an impediment. She did relatively well by securing 83% of the Republicans. Do you have some sense of how that broke out with things like independent Republicans and so forth?
I don't have a sense of the independent Republicans, but what we do have here is actually we can bring up the Jim Matheson Mia Love race from 2012.
Great. Let's take a look at that.
We'll take a look at that, and what you'll notice here is that Jim Matheson, indeed, he has a very strong margin among Democrats, of course, but among independents and Republicans, he's outperforming Owens this year, and that is kind of the key, the way that he's able to win that.
I agree, and that's the marker that I think the Owens campaign may look back on and be sorry about, because that could have made, I think, maybe the difference. We haven't called the race. It's still too close to call. It's within the margin of error, but it's clearly been trending towards Love as the Republican vote came in more heavily today, correct?
Correct. Next thing I want to look at is how the split ticket effect might have affected this race. So we looked at how Mia Love voters voted for president as well as Doug Owens. And here what we see is that 57% of Mia Love's voters voted for Trump, whereas 34% voted for McMullin, so kind of a split among there. But those people still turned out and voted mostly for the Republican candidate. Very few people skipped in this race, just 1%. And then among Doug Owens, a very interesting number here is the number of Clinton voters, which is reasonably low, 78%. So what we see is that Doug Owens is actually picking up some McMullin voters there with that 11% number and even a few Trump supporters.
Yeah, and you wonder a little bit if Mia Love's opposition to Trump may have alienated some of those people. It goes back to what Speaker Hughes was talking about with the unaffiliateds and the surge in unaffiliateds. Are some of those perhaps actually people who would have otherwise in prior cycles been Democrats or weak Democrats or pure independents? So let's talk a little bit about the disavowal of Trump by Mia Love. Did that have a direct bearing?
Yeah, so we asked that question if voters favored the House candidate more or less, whether if they disavowed Trump. And what we saw is that it kind of was a wash. Some voters, about 18%, favored that Republican candidate more for disavowing Trump, whereas 20% favored that candidate less. But you'll notice that almost balances each other out. And then for most voters, it was really a non-issue.
It was really a wash.
Just a wash.
Unlike some of the other races in the East we saw where it was a huge factor.
Yes, and it makes it an interesting question. Why? Why was Utah different? Why were Republicans not punished in Utah for either supporting Trump or, as Trump would have had it, for not supporting him? It seemed not to matter as much down ballot. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Speaking of down ballot, you have information for us, Josh, on the Senate race and whether we had split ticket there, whether that was very predictable.
Yeah, we can look at the split ticket among the Senate. And what we show there is that it's very similar to the 4th Congressional District, with a lot of Lee voters voting for McMullin, but of course the majority voting for Trump. So 59% here voted for, or 60%, excuse me, voted for Trump, whereas with McMullin we have 31%. What we do also see is that there's a little bit less Trump and McMullin defectors that support Misty Snow in this race compared to the 4th District.
Right. And so if you take 88% as straight ticket voting Democratic on the Senate and President, you have 91% if you count McMullin as a Republican, as Mr. Hughes asserted earlier in his interview, that sort of voted straight ticket, or at least Republican in one sense or another. So there wasn't a lot of split ticket voting, if you look at it that way, correct?
Correct. What I'd like to look at next is the party ID breakout for Senator Lee, how the different members of the parties voted. And what we see here is that Senator Lee actually has a very strong showing among independents, in fact, with 64% there.
Right.
So you can see how Senator Lee was able to kind of capture this race because of that strong support among independents and also, of course, among Republicans.
And this will be interesting for us to contrast with what happened to those independents when they were voting for the House, let's say within the 4th Congressional District. What kinds of voters voted for or preferred Lee, who were independents, but then may have preferred Owens? And there's going to be some debate, I think, about the candidacies of several of the Democrats who lost tonight.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Next, I'd like to look at how the Merrick Garland issue kind of affected the
Yeah, this is the issue that I couldn't transmit to the senator, because our viewers may be wondering why people can't hear, and maybe it's useful to tell them. Because the Republicans are so dispersed tonight at very many venues.
We're using different technology.
We're having to use multiple technologies, and some of them don't have the capacity that other places do, where they can hear in their ear with us. And so we're relaying questions. And if there's a lot of noise, as there seems to be at NOAA's, then all of a sudden the candidate can't hear. It was frustrating, I could tell, for Mike Lee. I feel badly about that. That's why it happened. The
question we were trying to pose was, given the results that you're going to share with us, Josh, of what Utahns said they wanted to have happen with Supreme Court nomination, what his reaction was to that. So why don't you show us?
Okay, so first here we can just relook at the overall what Utahns thought of the Merrick Garland nomination, and as you said before, a majority would like the Senate to hold a vote on that, but it is a slim majority.
What about of his voters?
So if we look at his voters,
Lee's voters, right?
Yes, this is This is Lee's voters that we're going to look at here, and it's not too surprising that a vast majority of them, 69%, would like to wait until the next year, next president to do that. But there is still a decent number there with 31% that do want that vote.
Interesting. Well, and we don't know who the next president's going to be. There have been some surprises already in the night, Josh, and this could be a very long night, as it was in the year 2000. So in terms of which president that is that's going to get to pick, I think a lot of people may have been assuming it was going to be President Clinton. But if it's President Trump, then it'd be a very different scenario and a very interesting one.
Definitely.
So in terms of the Utah House races, I assume they all stacked up in a pretty similar way. How would you summarize that? What would you like to show us to sort of have a sense of a typical first, second, and third congressional district vote?
Yeah, so we're going to show you the District 1 with Rob Bishop and Peter Clemens. This is very similar to how Districts 1, 2, and 3 all looked. And what you'll see here is that it's very expected. Rob Bishop picks up almost all the Republicans and picks up more independents than Clemens, and that is what allows him to win. And then it's very similar for every House district.
So it's essentially each candidate is getting their party vote at a very high rate compared to nationally even. But the race is determined in part because there's so many more Republicans in the first, second, and third district, roughly 2-to-1 ratio, and because the independents go slightly towards the incumbent, in this case Bishop, but also Stewart and Chaffetz. Mm-hmm. So it's what we might call a normal Utah congressional election.
Exactly.
Not split ticketing, it's just very predictable.
Not split ticketing, it's very much party, and that I think is part of the whole dynamic with the Trump vote as well. The party has become sort of institutionalized in the minds of Utah voters, and it's going to be hard to get people to not vote for the Republican Party, even when a candidate like, as described by Jason Chaffetz, like Donald Trump is running.
And you didn't find any Trump effect as you went through those other 3 congressional races?
No, not really, no. What I'd like to take us to next is the governor's race, actually, which I find interesting because Governor Herbert is a fairly popular governor, has a good approval rating here, and we can kind of see that in the governor's race tonight. So what you'll notice is that he picks up, of course, almost all the Republicans, and then a pretty wide margin of the independent vote, which kind of shows how much his approval rating kind of factors into this race.
Now, this is ironic, Josh, because he was challenged in a primary. He did not win at the Republican convention. There was some possibility that he wouldn't be able to run in the general election given his opponent's success at the convention. So he has to win in a primary. Most of the delegates voted against him, and yet he gets 94% of Utah Republican votes and 62% of independent votes. What does this say about the Republican Party?
I think it says that the Republican Party has kind of some potentially different wings in Utah, and maybe there's more of a wing that goes to the convention more often and is more active, that maybe would like someone more conservative, but the more moderate Republicans that maybe don't go out and get as heavily involved, they greatly favor the kind of campaign and the things that Herbert has done. So.
Okay, so he clearly is popular in Utah. I think that evidence is clear from what you've presented. Any other sort of additional thoughts about the Utah races?
I'd like to touch on the Syrian refugees.
Yes.
Yes, and we're going to break this out by the governor and who kind of those who supported Gary Herbert versus those who supported Mike Weinholz.
Now help us with context here. Why did we ask about Syrian refugees?
So we asked about Syrian refugees because Governor Herbert is the only Republican governor who did not call for them to stop coming to his state and has been, supportive of refugees. So that's why we asked about it.
Okay. And what do we find?
What we find here is that Herbert's voters are rather split among what we should do, with 38%, excuse me, saying that they should come to Utah, and 48% saying no. So there is a plurality there that says no, but what you don't see from this graph here is that there was a large percentage, 14%, that said that they didn't know. So this was a hard issue for Herbert supporters. And it may well be that they hadn't thought a lot about it. And so when we see a don't know like that, it's not bad news to us in survey research, right? No. It says voters are comfortable saying when they don't know. This is a complicated issue that obviously some voters haven't thought about, and if they say don't know at 14%, that's good news for us because it means we're feeling like they're being honest with us. Good. Thank you very much, Josh. This was superb. All right, thank you.
I am told that we have standing by live in Salt Lake to talk to us Mike Weinholz, the Democratic for governor. I don't know if there's a reporter there or not. Mr. Weinholz, can you hear me, please? Bruce Lindsay from KBYU. We're having audio problems right now, so we're going to come and get back to that in just a moment. How about we talk about outside money? That'd be a good plan? That's a term that political scientists use to describe the money used to support a candidate, but which is outside the campaign's direct control. Lucy Liu has been looking into that for us. Is Lucy at the Sheraton ready to give us a report on where the Democrats are gathered? She's been looking at how outside money played in one Utah congressional race in particular. Okay, we're going to have to
I can talk to you about outside money.
Well, I'm sure you can. And the thing that astonished me, David, is that looking online, that Hillary Clinton's campaign spent $1.3 billion as of a couple of weeks ago, and Donald Trump's nearly $800 million. That's a lot of money for every man, woman, and child in the United States. So where does that money really come from?
Well, it comes from a variety of sources. So the candidates are one primary way that money is raised and spent. And the candidates operate in a world which has some limits. It also has disclosure. And that is intended so the public can know where the money comes from. So the outside money is money that is outside the candidate's control, as you said, but it often is also money that is not disclosed as to the source. And we'll be talking about that in some of these key Senate races as we did earlier in the evening.
Has there always been that kind of money, or is this a much more recent development?
No, it's a more recent development. The Supreme Court, after a landmark decision in Watergate, when the Congress changed the law of campaign finance, said it's fine for people to spend independently, but they must disclose how much they raise and how much they spend. And for a time, there was some independent expenditures by individuals and so forth, but it really changed in 2010 with Citizens United versus the FEC, and that decision brought in the super PACs we've been talking about, and that also opened up other kinds of groups. In these other kinds of groups, there's no disclosure, so it becomes literally hundreds of millions of dollars that we've seen in 2012, 2014, and in 2016. It's changed the political landscape.
Should that make voters think that the vote they cast today or cast recently by mail has less influence than those millions and millions of dollars?
Well, it still means that your vote counts, because the dollars don't put people in office. The dollars persuade people to vote one way or the other, but that has a consequence. They wouldn't spend that kind of money if it didn't matter.
All right. I'm told that we have right now the 2nd Congressional District Congressman Chris Stewart, who has been reelected to the U.S. House of Representatives, joining us now. Please, Courtney, would you go ahead and interview the congressman?
Yeah, thank you so much for meeting with us today. So you earlier endorsed Trump, but you refused to rescind your endorsement. Yeah. Do you think that helped or hurt your campaign this year?
You know, I honestly don't know, and actually I don't care. At the time we were trying to do what we thought was right, and at the end of the day I had to ask myself this question: what is the right thing for our country? And when I looked at Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton, there was just no question in my mind that he was the right person.
Thank you. And what do you think persuaded voters to reelect you this year?
I'm sorry?
What do you think persuaded voters to reelect you?
You know, I think a couple things. Number one, and just the foundation, is I represent a conservative district, and I am a conservative. And I think that obviously helps when you're aligned with most of the people in your district. But they know that I'm working for them. They know that we've been out there trying to do everything we can to help our country And I think that that gets noticed, and after a while, I think it makes you feel like you're probably going to be okay in your election.
Earlier you were saying that Trump should step aside and Mike Pence should take the lead on this campaign, but then what changed your mind?
Well, once again, there was some things that he said that many of us here in Utah were concerned about, and that's understandable how he would when you hear those things. But Mr. Trump wasn't going to step aside. We saw that, and once again, I had to ask myself this question. Who's the right person to lead us? How can we do tax reform, entitlement reform? Who will protect our country? Who will bring back the American dream? And Mr. Trump is that person.
Thank you. And I believe Bruce Lindsay and Dr. Magleby have some questions for you back in the studio. Go ahead.
Well, Congressman Chris Stewart, if you can hear us, congratulations, of course, on your victory tonight. You campaigned with a pledge to repeal Obamacare. The makeup of the Senate is still very much in question tonight, as is the outcome of the presidential race. Does that remain a key priority for you?
Well, for sure it is, and part of the reason is I've talked to hundreds of people, and I mean it really, hundreds of people in my district and really throughout the state who have been hurt by Obamacare. But it's not just enough for us to say we're going to repeal it. We have a responsibility to say, this is what we're going to do. This is why it's a better plan. This is why it's going to help people, and it's not going to cost as much. It's not going to take away insurance. It's not going to take away doctors. So I absolutely support repealing Obamacare. But once again, we have to tell the American people, this is our plan, and this is why it's better.
Congressman Stewart, I hope you can hear us. You've mentioned quite a bit about Donald Trump.
You can hear me.
Yeah, I can, and I'm sorry. You've mentioned quite a bit about some of the attributes of Donald Trump. We've reviewed with the voters tonight our exit poll data, which shows that by very large margins, Utahns saw Donald Trump unfavorably. They saw Mike Pence much more favorably, Mitt Romney much more favorably. But then they also talked about specific characteristics and attitudes, how they treat women, honesty, and so forth and so on. Now, to be sure, people had negative views of Secretary Clinton, but they had even more negative views of Donald Trump. Should that have not mattered in terms of their choice for president?
Well, I think it should matter, and it did matter. I mean, there were many of us who were troubled by that. And by the way, I think you got to give Republicans credit, because when Mr. Trump said things that we disagreed with, we had the courage to confront him on that. We had the courage not just to walk away and ignore it, but to talk about those things. And the Democrats should have been willing to do that with Secretary Clinton as well. If there'd been more Democrats who were more honest and more courageous in saying, these are the concerns I have with Secretary Clinton, I think the voters may have responded to that. But to answer your question directly, yeah, Mr. Trump said some things that were of deep concern with many Utahns. But at the end of the day, for the last couple of weeks, I've been saying, I think most Utahns, most Republicans are going to come home. They love their country. They have to do what they think is right for their country. And many of them decided that Mr. Trump was the right person.
Thank you, Congressman Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a brief break. It's just past 9:30, and then we'll be back talking with more candidates and keep tracking the outcome of the Senate and the White House after this short break.
I need Bruce.
And thank you for staying with us. With Dr. David Magleby, I'm Bruce Lindsay, with a team of communication students and political science students and statistics students who are putting together our coverage this evening of Vote Utah 2016. Let's check back with a member of our regional analyst team covering hotly contested Senate elections tonight. David?
Joining us is Jason Hunt. He's from Stafford, Virginia, a senior in political science. And you've been covering some races that nobody thought would be battlegrounds. One of them is Minnesota. Tell us what's happening in the presidential race there.
Right now in the presidential race for Minnesota, they've only reported 49% of the vote. However, it's looking like it's leaning towards Hillary Clinton. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made a kind of surprise visit and held a rally in Minnesota on Monday. And because they haven't called Minnesota yet, it seems that it might be working. We'll find out what happens later on.
Wow, that would be a big surprise. Let's turn then to Iowa, a battleground at the beginning of this race in both parties. In many ways, it set the stage for this highly contentious, quite negative campaign, which has endured for nearly a full calendar year. What's happening in the Iowa presidential contest?
Yeah, it all started in Iowa back in February, and it's looking like it'll lean towards Donald Trump. It's at a 54% reporting, but it's too early to call, but it's looking like Iowa. This just in. It looks like Iowa has been called for Donald Trump.
Okay.
This just in, we have red on our map. Let's move just south from Iowa to Missouri. Jason, that's a state clearly for Trump tonight, but Senator Roy Blunt has been having the run for his life in the last few months. Is there an outcome there yet?
There's no outcome yet. It's at 66% reported. It's looking like Roy Blunt will take it. However, Jason Kander became a late competitor into this race, so it could go either way. It's too early to call.
How did Kander make this a competitive race against a sitting Republican senator in a reliably Republican state?
It's almost like he came out of nowhere. In mid-September, he put out a very successful political ad that put him on the map. I have it queued up for us now if we'd want to take a look at it.
Let's take a look.
I'm Jason Kander, and Senator Blunt has been attacking me on guns. Well, in the Army, I learned how to use and respect my rifle. In Afghanistan, I'd volunteer to be an extra gun in a convoy of unarmored SUVs. And in the state legislature, I supported Second Amendment rights. I also believe in background checks so that terrorists can't get their hands on one of these. I approve this message because I'd like to see Senator Blunt do this.
And apart from the novelty of that ad, of course, he was responding to what, a concern that he was soft on gun rights?
Correct. It seemed that he was trying to get over the crossover vote from the Republican Party. And this ad really just kind of boosted his popularity and made him a real contender for this race.
How did Blunt respond?
He didn't like the video. He dismissed Kander's ability to use a gun and put out his own video response.
Do you have a copy of that?
Yeah,
Let's see how you answer that ad.
Some people can put together a gun blindfolded. Some do it really fast. Some really, really fast. Some do it upside down and blindfolded. But only one of these is a Hillary Clinton national campaign chairman. Only one received an F for his failure to defend the Second Amendment. Only one supports amnesty for illegal immigrants. When it comes to the U.S. Senate, Missouri voters know what's important.
I'm Roy Blunt, and I approve this message.
That's an amazing pivot, isn't it?
Yeah, he immediately pegged Kander back to Hillary Clinton, who's widely unpopular in the state.
So what's the result tonight in Missouri? We've had Missouri called in the presidential race, but what's the story with the Senate race?
The story in the Senate race is that we'll find out.
Hasn't been called?
Hasn't been called yet.
Okay. So in this race to get a net gain of 4 seats, as I'm looking at the scorecard or thinking about the scorecard, it looks like the Democrats have picked up a seat in Illinois. They have not lost any seats that they held before. We do not know about New Hampshire. We do not know about Pennsylvania. We do not know about North Carolina. Is that correct? So if those 3 were all to go Democrats, then they would have a net gain of 4, assuming they don't lose Nevada, which we'll, of course, be talking about later. So we're still too soon, but it's clear that several of the races that many people thought might go Democratic in a tide are not going Democratic. Republicans are holding on in some of them.
Hey, Jason, just one more question. In the same vicinity there in Nebraska, we have that leaning Republican, but Nebraska has an interesting way of allocating its electoral votes, hasn't it?
Correct. Similar to Maine, they divide up the electoral vote. In Nebraska, 2 of them go to the popular vote, while 3 are divided up between the congressional districts. It's looking right now that it's been called for Donald Trump. However, we're still waiting on the Omaha district to figure out where that electoral vote will go to.
So, like Maine, which also hasn't been called, part of the reason may be this unusual electoral college arrangement, which reminds us that the rules of the electoral college are not set in the Constitution. They're a state-by-state determination, and states, as in these 2 cases, Bruce, have gone a different way. It's kind of like proportional representation. If there's one part of the state that goes one way, it gets to choose that elector, and the rest of the state can have their electors.
It's a curious system, isn't it? It's incredible how this was drafted.
Well, and if it's really close tonight, and it could be really close tonight, given the map as it is now, it could be that those 2 electors, the one in Maine and the one in Nebraska, could be really important. And it could also mean that if McMullen had won Utah, we might not have a winner tonight. It would go to the House of Representatives.
Let's look at the map just for a moment and let me pick your brain. So they've already called the West Coast. Nevada is in play. Nevada is really in play. That's probably going to be a too close to call list. Well, it is at this point, clearly. Arizona, it's in the past been a reliably Republican state.
Yes. And I think in some ways the story of those two states, as we'll learn later tonight, is very similar. There's been a tremendous mobilization effort with Hispanic voters. And that also explains why Colorado and New Mexico are blue. So there's a sort of ethnic arc there that has become quite important. And the interesting long-term question is, when will it more further impact Utah politics?
Curious, it seems to me that Pennsylvania we knew would be a battleground. Georgia is up for grabs this late in the night?
I'm surprised at that.
Unusual?
I am surprised at that. I would have thought North Carolina would be, excuse me, that's South Carolina. North Carolina would be much more in play than South Carolina tonight. And it's been decided, than Georgia, I should say. And so the fact that North Carolina's been called and Georgia hasn't is a puzzle to me.
And leaning Democratic in the upper Midwest, in Michigan, those mysterious visits to Michigan and Minnesota, truly the Trump campaign may have been on to something.
It suggests that their polling was better than I think a lot of people thought, and it makes for a very interesting night tonight. This is a bit of deja vu to 2000 for me.
Which means you don't want to get ahead of yourself in predicting what's going to happen.
No, I don't think we know. I think it is very close.
All right. Well, voters can choose to cast a ballot. We've been talking about this tonight early by absentee voting. They can find that the county clerk has sent them that ballot to return by mail, or a lot of them waited today to do the old-fashioned thing and go to a voting center and vote on an electronic voting machine. What did voters think of the ballot casting experience? That's a topic of investigation.
Well, and Stephen Jameson, whom we met earlier tonight, is a person who's been focusing on that intensely. And let's let you walk us through some of the data. We included it in the exit poll because we thought it might be an important public policy question. What have we learned?
Yeah, this has been a really big matter of interest for us here in the state of Utah. We found that for the election day turnout, it was actually 75%, and only 25% of people cast their ballots early. We were expecting a lot bigger early vote turnout, especially because 21 of the 29 counties in Utah have switched to this all vote by mail system.
And only 25% took advantage of that.
Exactly. That surprised us.
That surprised you? It surprised the lieutenant governor? And probably
surprised the county
clerks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any indication why from the data?
We've thought about a lot of the different things that could have impacted that. I think one thing that is very interesting was the fact that 2/3 of Democrats had made up their minds at the time of the convention on who they were going to vote for, but only 1/3 of Republicans had. So that may have been a factor in this issue.
I just want to jump in here on one thing about registration that Stephen mentioned. 75% of registered voters, and the lieutenant governor added a word to that definition called registered and active. I don't know what that means. That's a new term for me in terms of registration. But the important point, I think, for our viewers is to understand that that's not 75% of all eligible voters. That is, people who are of age and have citizenship. Utah's turnout, Bruce, has been surprisingly low. We used to be among the leaders in the nation in turnout. We used to be competitive with the North Dakotas and the Minnesotas, Wisconsins, which have high rates of turnout. But as the vote was extended to 18 to 20-year-olds, we fell because we have so many more younger people. Mm-hmm. And Utah over time has become a laggard in voter turnout.
What are the factors in that? Is it because
I think there's a lack of competition,
okay,
and competition drives turnout. I think that may be part of the problem. I think part of it is also they haven't seen that well, it's really the competition that I guess.
Well, are certain groups more predisposed to vote?
Oh, certainly.
What separates the 40% who don't vote and 60%
and all of
who
the
do
measures
the
that predispose people to vote, other than age, should make Utah a high turnout state. That is, education is the other most important predictor besides age. So what hurts us a lot is our younger voters. And there's a concern in this state, and I think should be attended to about millennials and young people feeling disengaged from politics. And so I think there's a long-term issue. We're off on a subject here about registration, but when Stephen said 75% of registered voters, it really is closer to 60% of eligible voters, maybe less than that. Okay, let you get back to your data.
Well,
Sorry.
just to jump in on that point, I think one thing that may be driving a lot of the push to switch to vote by mail is the fact that the other states that have switched, namely Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, have seen a boost in their presidential vote, especially in the first few years that they've switched. However, we've seen that those numbers have gone down to usually what about it was before they switched to vote by mail.
There's a novelty effect that seems to wear off.
Right.
Exactly. But one other thing that we saw that was interesting today is the fact that even though you had 75% of people that decided to vote on Election Day, we took some polls about how people thought about vote by mail, and we saw that 47% strongly agreed that voting by mail would actually be more convenient way to vote. And so we would think that that would try to drive some of this higher turnout towards people going for voting by mail. As well, we also saw that people, over 50% of people thought that it helps you be better informed. As Allie Davis mentioned in her piece, that you can sit down at the kitchen table and talk about it and discuss the issues with your family and come to a decision there. Another issue that's been on the table a lot this election cycle has been fraud. Mike Weinholtz, especially, the Democratic candidate for governor, brought that up because a lot of the signature processes for how you sign your ballot when you send it in are different from county to county, and those are also different from how it is on the lieutenant governor's website. So Weinholtz thought that that would maybe confuse some of the voters and disadvantage him, but most people said that that wasn't an issue for them.
Well, let's talk a little bit about whether they're satisfied with their process here.
Yeah. So we found that most people, they were confident that it was going to work, and they were satisfied. If we look at this graphic here, about 72% of people were satisfied with their voting experience here in 2016.
And that's across all methods of voting, is it?
Yes.
Stephen?
So one thing we'll want to probe on, Stephen, is whether that level of satisfaction is more or less true of the different ways people voted. Right. I think we've got actually a chance to.
We have an interview that's on
Mike
tape. Just a few moments ago, our James Peterson spoke with Mike Weinholtz at the Sheraton in downtown Salt Lake, and let's roll that interview and have his reaction tonight.
I'm here at the Sheraton for the Democratic Party with Mike Weinholtz. Mike, thanks for meeting with me. Coming into this this race, you've spent $450,000 of your own money. Have you felt tonight that that money was well spent?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what it costs to run a campaign. And it looks like Hillary just won.
Oh, yes?
Yeah. Well, projection. So it's loud in here. Sorry.
Very loud.
But no, I said from the beginning that I was going to largely self-finance my campaign because I didn't want to take any corporate money because I think that smacks of conflict, and that was one of the ways I differentiated myself from Governor Herbert. So I don't view it as money poorly spent at all. That's what it takes.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the big news tonight. Right now, it's really close between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. What does this race mean for the Democratic Party in Utah?
Well, it's not just in Utah. It's nationally, and so it would be historic, of course, if Hillary Clinton won Utah. And I haven't heard any latest projections on the state, but it's also important, that she wins nationally because Donald Trump is just not prepared or equipped to be president of the United States.
According to our exit polls right now, you're running. Governor Herbert is 30 points ahead of you at the time. Do you feel like that had anything to do with the state being mainly Republican at all, or?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, this is one of the most reliably red states in the country, and we knew when we decided to run that it would be an uphill battle for any Democrat running in a statewide race here. And So yeah, of course, it's always a tough slog for a Democrat running in Utah.
Well, I just want to say thanks, Mike, for meeting with us, and good luck tonight.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
James Peterson, Vote Utah 2016.
Thank you, James. To recap that race, our exit poll projection is Gary Herbert 60%, Mike Weinholz.
Well, and very kind
33.
of Mike Weinholz.
Very gracious of
to
him
do an
appear.
interview. You know, this has got to be a tough.
Has to be very difficult. He invested himself and a lot of his personal fortune in this, and one of the cornerstones of his campaign was education. He said that if he wasn't able to lead from the governor's chair a reform of education, he'd like to do that with an initiative petition as a private citizen. I would really like to have asked him what his thoughts are on that tonight, but he certainly added to the conversation.
He did, and again, I think down deep you probably know you don't have much of a chance, but you have to gear up to go out there, and so to be willing to have an interview with a student journalist, we're appreciative.
We are, and just to remind you, of course, this tonight with student journalists and student political science majors and statisticians, you're watching the midterm for Dr. Magleby and some other professors here. This is live and unfiltered. It's a great and remarkable exercise for all of us. For you, we hope, and particularly for the students who have this opportunity to interface with the candidates and observe the political process up close. I know I'm learning a lot tonight. As it gets later in the evening, key Senate and presidential contests come into focus in our part of the country. Out here in the West, some things are still very much up for grabs, like Nevada. Let's go back to our regional analyst, Dr. Magleby.
We've got Manny Morga with us. He's a senior in political science from Las Vegas, Nevada. He was able to go along with other students from one of our classes to observe the third presidential debate in Las Vegas. Manny, tell us a little bit about what's going on in that Nevada presidential race. It hasn't been colored yet. Does that surprise you?
It does not surprise me. The battleground state is definitely fighting for both campaigns. While I was down there visiting, no campaign has a clue who's actually winning. And so everyone's trying to throw their Hail Marys to the Latino vote there in Nevada. And that's why today we even had an accusation by Donald Trump in his campaign that was actually suing the polling officials over whether or not they administrated early vote there in Nevada correctly.
So what was the dispute about?
So the Trump campaign was suing polling officials because they said that the poll workers that are supposed to close the polling locations at 8 were allowing other individuals to vote right after the polls should have been closed. And so both campaigns are nervous, or I should say the Trump campaign is nervous that those extra votes are going to go towards Hillary Clinton.
But in Utah, the rule is if you're in line at 8 o'clock, you get to vote. What's the rule in Nevada?
The rule in Nevada is it's very similar. So if the polling location closes at 8, a poll worker is assigned to go to the end of that line, wherever that is, and they are supposed to stop the voting right then and there. Anyone that comes after that is not allowed to vote. What the Trump campaign is saying is that they're afraid that other individuals were still allowed to vote and that no poll worker was allowed to do that. But the judge dismissed that. She said that the Trump campaign jumped through too many hurdles and went straight to the courts, whereas they should be going through the registrar's office.
Okay. Well, there's controversy about the vote, but we don't know who's won.
We don't, and it's going to be a tight race throughout the night, and I'm sure everyone in the country is looking at Nevada at this moment, not only for the presidential race, but for also the Senate race.
Let's shift to that Senate race. Tell us what's happening there.
So in the Senate race, it's very close as well. Catherine Cortez Masto is trying to take Harry Reid's seat, and Harry Reid has been helping her. A lot of people have said that the Harry Reid machine is helping her win this race. But as of right now, we don't know if that will be true or not.
Okay. Well, you've observed this race, but lots of other people have come to visit the state, not just you back to your home state. President Obama was there. I think you've actually got a clip or an ad of him visiting Nevada. Is that right?
I do. I have a clip of President Obama. It's a radio ad where he endorses Catherine Cortez Masto and asks others to vote. Can we actually listen to that?
Let's do it.
This is President Barack Obama. In this election, Republicans are running to take us backward and undo all that we've done together. That's why it's so important to get out and vote, not just for president, but for Senate as well. I'm backing Catherine Cortez Masto for Senate because she'll fight for you every day. Catherine was one of the first attorneys general in America to sue the big banks for the practices that led to the mortgage crisis. In the Senate, she'll work to raise the minimum wage, reduce the cost of college, and invest in our schools. Again, this is President Barack Obama asking you to vote for Catherine Cortez Masto for Senate.
Manny, thank you so much. We understand that Senator Hatch is available to interview. We're going to come back to you and learn more about this Senate race, so don't go away.
Thanks, Manny. Courtney Ellsworth of KBYU 11 is live with Senator Hatch. Courtney would be happy to. He doesn't have to be reelected tonight, but he just gets to bask in the Republican landslide in Utah.
Yes. Thank you so much for meeting with me, Senator Hatch. You are the president pro tem of the Senate right now. You've said before that Merrick is a good man. Would you give him a hearing, a confirmation hearing, if Clinton were to be elected tonight?
We'll have to wait and see what happens there. I do like Merrick quite a bit, but we'll see who wins the presidency and then go from there.
Great. And rumors are circulating that you're thinking about running for another term in 2018. Are those true?
We haven't even given any thought to it. I've been so busy campaigning around the country and helping other senators and raising money for people, so I haven't even given any thought to it. But we'll look at that in time, in the future.
Will whoever wins the presidency tonight affect that decision?
It could, because if Trump wins the presidency, he's going to need people like me there. There's no question about it. In fact, if Hillary wins it, she's already contacted us and said she wants to work with me. So all I can say is that, I'll work with whoever it is in the best interest of the country. But there are only certain things I'm willing to do.
You said Clinton contacted you. What was that conversation like?
Well, she didn't contact me personally. She had people contact me. But every time I've had a conversation with her, it's been a friendly one.
And I believe Dr. Magleby and Bruce Lindsay have some questions for you back in the studio. Go ahead.
That'd be fine.
Senator, good evening. I heard you walk back something. I heard you walk back something you said in 2012 when you were running for re-election. You said that you would not be running for another term. You've changed your mind. Is that right?
I haven't even considered it so far, and I've been so busy I haven't even thought about it. So we'll have to look at that. If things are in the best interest of the country, in the best interest of our state, the best interest of our people, heck, I'll do anything to try and do what's right. So, I don't know what's going to happen here. All I can say is that I would still have time left on the Senate Finance Committee as chairman, and that's pretty important because the next election, Republicans should do even better than they've done tonight.
Supporters of yours have launched a multi-million-dollar fundraising campaign to build a Hatch Center in your honor. Political reports that they're already hitting up Utah-based donors and K Street donors. Tell us what this would be.
Well, a number of my supporters have started what's called the Orrin G. Hatch Foundation. They want to be able to have a place to house my papers, which have been in great demand. Ted Kennedy wanted them. Almost every university in the state wants them, and frankly, it's 40 years so far of really, really effective work in the United States Senate. So, but not only house the papers, but also provide some, a facility there that, free market economics and other principles can be taught.
Senator, it's Dave Magleby in the studio. Thank you for joining us. I want to make sure you can. I want to make sure you can hear us. It's pretty loud there, I can tell. One of the interesting things in the exit poll is we asked a lot of questions about candidate characteristics, and it's clear that Utah voters had a much more positive impression of Evan McMullin than they did either of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. It's so close tonight in the presidential race that it could have turned out that Utah would have been the state that could have forced this to the House of Representatives. If that had been the case, there might have been a very different president, not Clinton, not Trump, someone else. Are you having some regret that Utah didn't go with McMullin?
Well, I don't agree with Mr. McMullen. I think he's probably a pretty fine guy, and at least from all that I know. But he's not going to figure in this race no matter what happens. So, and if he costs Donald Trump the race, I think it'd be tough for me to get over that, to be honest with you. But he's not going to win. But I give anybody credit who wants to get involved and be part of this system and working for the country.
One final question. You mentioned to Courtney a little bit about the Merrick Garland confirmation that's been pending for so long. Given your long experience on the Judiciary Committee, do you think that it's a better option to have Trump or Clinton choose the next nominee, or to let the choice of President Obama's go to a vote?
Well, I don't know how that's all going to work itself out. If Trump is elected, it's more than likely he'd want to appoint his own people to the court. If Hillary's elected, then of course we'll have to give great consideration to Merrick Garland, who I know personally and think quite highly of. So, but there's no use kidding. Merrick is on the Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. In his 19 years there, has upheld almost every regulatory matter in favor of the federal government, and that bothers me quite a bit, even though I like him personally very much.
We've seen something very unusual in this year's Senate races, Senator. More than one Republican has gone on record saying that if Clinton is elected, they will make an effort in the Senate to not confirm any Supreme Court nominations for the next 4 years. Do you support that agenda?
Well, the only one that I've heard say that, or I understand has said that, is the senator from Texas. And I don't think well, I haven't heard them say it, but I don't think that's the way things should run.
Thank you.
We have to look at every nominee and look at them on the merits and see what happens.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you for being our guest. The evening march is on.
Nice to be with you.
It's after 10 o'clock. We'll take a short break, and Vote Utah 2016 election night coverage will return.
Utah College's exit poll is a joint collaboration among Utah's public and private colleges and universities. More than 1,200 students across many academic disciplines volunteer to talk to voters. They reach out to them during early voting and vote-by-mail days by way of telephone surveys. On Election Day, they interview citizens as they leave voting locations after voting. The KBYU Utah College's exit poll gratefully acknowledges the contributions of students and supervising faculty at Utah institutions of higher learning for their generous donation of time and energy in making this project possible. Major financial support for conducting the KBYU Utah College's exit poll comes from the Semnani Family Foundation, promoting research, education, and civic initiatives in Utah and around the world. Additional financial support is generously provided by the following Brigham Young University entities: the BYU Mentored Research Fund, the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences, the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy, the Department of Political Science, the Department of Statistics, and the School of Communications.